Okay, so I have three mindsets that I want to share with you that have always helped me in just finding my sense of balance and knowing what the boundaries are that I'm going to need to put in place. And I think that they'll help you as well. And I also have a resource that I think will be very valuable. It's definitely helped me to stay on track and to stay simplified, but also hold the boundaries that I've decided for myself and also communicate those with those that I'm going to spend the holidays with. So let's start with mindset number one. This mindset is that God supports the peace that you and I are seeking. I think that's such an important mindset that we have to bring ourselves back to when you are in this mode of, maybe life goes on pretty well the rest of the year, but you're getting into this phase where it could be the holidays, which is usually, the end of the year for the most of us, no matter what culture we're in. But it can also be like just anything where you feel like, ooh, it's going to be a huge event, or it's going to be something that you are usually the person who takes on a lot of the role. So whatever holiday or big event is approaching for you and you're looking at setting the boundaries that you need, if it starts to feel like everything is pulling you in 100 different directions, and you're always trying to please everyone, then you definitely know you need boundaries. But it's not so much that you know you need them, it's figuring out how do you set them and how do you maintain this sense of groundedness in that importance, right? Well, in the sense of God supporting us, in the peace that we are seeking. I think that's something that we have to bring ourselves back to. We love the idea of, oh, picture perfect Hallmark presentation of a family picture or a holiday dinner or whatever it is. I mean, those things are so idealized, whether it's a Hallmark movie that we've seen them in or, an Instagram post, whatever it is. There is a picture that we have in our minds. And while that's wonderful, we definitely got to gather our thoughts first, because we definitely need to ensure that we've got clear limits. We've got to know our time constraints, and we got to know the energy that we want to bring, because we know we don't want to be that resentful person or feel like we're a martyr. So this mindset number one, it's just that this boundaries are actually supporting you in staying centered, in staying balanced, and starting with that clarity and that direction so that it will inform how you move forward in this holiday season coming up. So I just know that it's about prayerfully considering and honoring what your God-given need for balance, because that is something so intrinsic within us. And when we wake up to, okay, I can't continue to maintain this kind of, giving to everybody else and running myself dry, we know, oh, it's because I'm not balancing that with finding my center and finding my sense of equilibrium in life and in what I'm bringing, what I'm willing to give. Okay, so how do we apply this mindset? Well, I think there are two things we can do. We prayerfully want to honor balance. We want to honor the inner wisdom that God gives us when we say, please help me with my boundaries. We really want to honor that. And we also want to release our guilt about saying no so that we can really embrace more wholeheartedly whatever we can say yes to. Okay? So if you believe that God is supporting you in seeking peace and finding a way to be a little bit more balanced in how you show up in this whole dynamic of preparing for holidays and communicating with others and spending time together, then the prayerfully honoring the balance and the inner wisdom that you want, that's a personal thing. You're just going to first be going inward. You're going to be taking those moments to just pray and ask God, if boundaries are meant so that I can stay centered and be in alignment here and continue to listen here instead of be so worried about overcompensating and people pleasing and forgetting this aspect, balancing those two things more. Please help me, God, to understand to where in my life am I feeling out of balance? What kind of boundaries would help me to honor the peace and the wholeness that you desire me to bring into situations? What have I been afraid to say no to, and how can I do better in figuring out the boundaries that I need so that I can more wholeheartedly say yes to the things that I'm able to do and willing to do. Okay? And then, really dig a little deeper into that part about the saying no and the saying yes, where you're just asking God, please help me to understand, when I said no, or I wanted to say no, but I felt guilty and I wasn't really honoring the truth that no, I need to say no here, why did I feel guilty? Whose expectations or pressures was I carrying? You might have to do some soul searching and, asking for a spirit's guidance in helping you to have that clarity, because when you're trying to trust that, okay, I can seek peace and boundaries can support me in creating a more peaceful and a more open, loving, wholehearted kind of interaction as we go through these holidays with your family members and so forth, you're asking that you want God's help to just please help me to receive your guidance and be more comfortable in setting boundaries without so much of that worry, because now by doing so, you're going to be able to be more wholehearted in saying yes. And it's because you're honoring boundaries and you're communicating them effectively. It's okay knowing what's okay for you and what isn't with Spirit's guidance. That is going to help your decisions to get easier, your relationships to be healthier, and your purpose to be clearer. And when you lead from that place, you're leading from your balance, you're leading from your center, so that you start to see that boundaries won't be the walls that you thought they were, the things that push people away. Because sometimes we do have that warped sense in ourselves. They're actually just helping us to be our best self, where we're more balanced in our own mind, heart, and spirit, and listening to the leading of God, trusting that God is going to guide us to create more balance in the actual dynamics, okay? So mindset number one, this idea that establishing boundaries is a vital step because it's going to help you to simplify. I think that's something we need to embrace. But we're still asking ourselves, well, what does that look like in practice, right? And that's where mindset number two comes in. Proactive communication will empower change. And that's what you're getting ready to do. You're getting ready to establish some change where you're no longer the only person who is giving, or the only person who is thinking in your own mind that you have to be covering all the bases. There are many, many things that we will always do to cover the bases in holiday preparations if you are kind of that leader in the family or the person that enjoys doing that. So that part's not a problem. But any martyrdom, any resentment, any finding that, you were happy to give, but at home you were being, this nasty person to your husband or to your kids. I mean, I'm that person. I know what that feels like. So in that sense, proactive communication is going to empower the change that you're realizing you want to do. You want to set holiday boundaries that are actually going to help you all be more successful. So when you're ready for that, there are going to be family members and just people that are involved who are so used to you being the family peacekeeper or that yes person or the organizer. And it can feel hard to let that go because that's kind of an ego boost. I promise you. I mean, that's how I've felt in the past, It's an ego boost, but when you're finally saying, but balance is so vital, and I am starting to really honor that in my own balance journey. And that means that I have to communicate in a different way now. You might get pushback, right? Because those same people, they are very used to you and how you showed up and how, okay, well, I get to not think about anything until the day of the event or something, right? And then I get there and everything's planned. And like I said, while we are happy to do so as planners and as leaders, the idea of being proactive about communicating, when I had to start saying, oh, I didn't realize that I've never really balanced this out. Some of the things that have helped me, and I think they can help you too, is that you've got to communicate that, okay, I'm more focused on balance. So that's where all of my requests will be coming from. That's where my suggestions will be coming from. It's from this place of seeking balance, not just personal balance, but balance within the dynamic of our family and within the contributions that we all make and that sort of thing. So communicating your focus on that is an important first step. And, just being able to convey, if it feels appropriate to you, that, God is actually helping me to understand the importance of balanced effort, balanced contribution. I want to empower all of us. I don't want it to be only me who is just being the one that everyone relies on. And then letting people know that, things might look different, therefore, because you're honoring your boundaries. You're figuring out what you might be pulling back from and maybe changing. And, you're just getting to the point where you're saying, somebody has to be willing to take steps for better balance, and I'm ready to do that, so here I am communicating proactively. And that kind of proactive communication, you've got to do it early. As soon as it dawns on you, you have to start paving the way with little comments, with little communications that help people to understand things are shifting. That is a very important proactive thing that I've always done, that I know you can do too. It really impacts not just suddenly, laying it all on the line for people. Okay, so early communication, long before you're starting to plan, you're starting to talk about how you are in a new phase, you're understanding balance, or however you want to, approach that subject, but you're sharing it with the key people in the dynamic of your family. And you're doing that often, not just one time. And you're trying your best to be as clear as possible with choosing how to approach that with just I statements. It can sound something like this, I'm doing things a little differently this year, or I'm going to be doing things a little differently this year. You can be talking about your participation. I'm thinking just to prepare one dish this year, instead of handling so many different courses. And so I'll be checking with the rest of you to see what each of you wants to add to that. That could be a dialogue in relation to how you're planning to participate. You're not telling anyone else what they're going to do differently. You're simply stating what you are intending to start changing in the scenario. Or you might talk about time commitments in that way. You're like, okay, or like we, your husband and you, or your family, going to the grandparents' house or something. Well, we can be there to celebrate with you from this time to this time. And you've talked it over with your partner and you've worked through those things, and you just are saying, here's a time frame that we'll be there, but we cannot wait to reconnect with everyone. You're always stating your I statement, and then you're following it up with a positive imagination of how that's going to look, or in the sense of like, well, what you're planning on giving. A lot of holidays are related with gift giving. So maybe saying, I'm planning to limit gift exchanging because of our own situation. And you never have to explain your own situation. It's simply, we've talked it over, and what will work for us this year is to limit it to a certain amount of money spent, or something like that. Whatever you're doing, you're just saying, here's the limit that we are giving, and I'm so excited to just focus on the meaningful connections rather than any financial stress, something like that. So these kinds of comments, you have to remember, this is a work in progress. You are possibly going to get pushback because people might say, well, you always handle everything. Like, what's the deal, right? And like I said, if you've been doing early communication proactively, you are not trying to manipulate anybody else in any way. You're simply informing. Things are changing in me. Things are broadening in my perspective. I'm wanting to be more mindful about how I choose this or that, my time or whatever. And so in that sense, the people pushing back saying, oh, well, you're being selfish or you're being difficult, I honestly don't imagine that you would really have to go through that unless you really have someone who has always pushed your buttons like that. And if you do, here are some ways that I think you could neutralize that. Neutralize the pushback before it happens. You're going to be using phrases that include that possible pushback in your actual communication. Those proactive communications you do ahead of time, where you're just saying, look, I realize that changing the way we've always done things, well, that can feel like ruining the holiday tradition, but I am still able to do these things, and you want to claim again, here's my boundary, here's what I'm able to do. And I'm curious, like, maybe what could you maybe add that you don't want to lose from the tradition? And what could you maybe add, right? Because all of the changes that we're suggesting are not so that we can have a total shift to something we want. We're just saying this is the limit to what I can do. And if somebody was to possibly want to give you that as a pushback, this is a way to include them in the solution. Okay? So in that sense, if we can remember, like with mindset number 1, that God is supporting us in holding these boundaries, because these boundaries are enabling us to be more mind, heart, spirit centered and come from that place of openness and wholeheartedness. And that this proactive communication that you're going to start committing to is going to pave the way for those changes. And it doesn't have to be so nasty or ugly. It can truly be incrementally shifting because you're being proactive and you're doing this communicating early and often and as clearly as you can about your I statements, what you will do, and then using the language that will help people to see that you, of course, would be expecting them to contribute, and you're excited to see how that's going to play out. And then we come to the third mindset that you're going to need for setting these boundaries, and whether that's holidays or other events, and that is boundaries are really vital for a healthy balance. And balance is just non-negotiable. Okay, so holidays can particularly be a tough time for boundaries. That's a given because there's pressure to keep traditions. You put that pressure on yourself. My mom always did it, or your mom always did it, or things like that. We're so hard on ourselves thinking that this one day or this one event or this one season, you're supposed to make all of these things happen. So boundaries can feel extra tough during these times, where we're thinking we're supposed to make everyone happy and to do it all ourselves. That is a real challenge. But if you can keep the mindset that boundaries are vital for healthy balance and that balance is not optional, that is key. When we start really saying, I want to be mindful about balance, about coming home to this center for myself, the feeling you get is such a grounded, settled feeling that you just are not going to show up in the same way as you used to, where you were like, I got to get everything done, I mean, that's a typical phase, I think, of really wanting so much to be bringing, the beautiful traditions to the next generation and all of that. It's typical, but we can bring it back just a bit and say, okay, I can set some holiday boundaries that are actually going to help us all be having this sense of success, this sense of true peace, and this sense of true joy. And not that you don't already have that, but the parts that you resent and the little thoughts you have and the exhaustion you feel. You know it. I knew it. So balance is not optional. It is truly essential. So if you think of it as just how you are honoring the intrinsic pull that God has with us, that just says, okay, hold on, always make sure to maintain this sense of settledness and this sense of centeredness, then just think of it as learning to practice boundaries with yourself first. And in this playlist, this series of boundary videos and content that I've created, it's really something that I've touched upon in several of the previous videos, like, assessing your self-worth and stopping your overcompensating. These types of things are, in the previous videos I've mentioned, using the straw method, to gain clarity on your boundaries. I feel like those things are very important, and now you can apply those in this group settings of, like, getting ready for holidays and so forth. But this third mindset, just remember, balance is non-negotiable. It is built on boundaries. We don't have balance if we don't say, hold on. What matters here is just as important as what everybody needs from me and wants from me and demands from me. Okay, so I think those three mindsets together if you can embrace them and feel settled with that as the truth about, like just how God has created the longings we have. We want so much, for everybody to approve of what we're doing here, but we also know that, when we feel off balance, it really creates the kind of person we don't want to be. So knowing that that's going to really help us to stay settled in, okay, boundaries, I know why I'm doing my boundaries and so forth. Then I want to now tell you about a great companion resource that can help you to hold these holiday boundaries, to actually define them. Okay, so the resource that I found about 20 years ago already is called a holiday control journal. And it's from a lady who calls herself the Fly Lady. And she says she's the Fly Lady because she says she wants to help you finally love yourself. FLY. And when I found her book, and then eventually she created her website and everything, it was very timely for me. And I just think that every year, when the holidays come around, I always remember and I go and I print her holiday control journal. And that's what I really want to tell you about right now. As far as setting holiday boundaries and really feeling successful, I think that the fact that Fly Lady talks to you about making decisions, in this printable set of papers that she's put together. I think it's like, you don't have to print it all, okay? But I think it's like a 20-page document. She definitely has this great intro where she talks to you about making decisions so that you can have some direction in your holiday planning and you can have some peace. And so that you really can enjoy your holidays the way you want to, the way you want to honor all the reasons for the holidays. And she talks about how you can talk things over with your loved ones and decide on boundaries together. And I think that's a huge thing. And it really helped me just to even consider that that's an important thing to do. So maybe like the elaborate meal that you always make, you might find out if you really are willing to have this conversation with the important people in the family that would help make you that decision, Maybe it's not as important to your family as you think it is to them, And so you're killing yourself trying to make it all happen, and they would be much happier to have you be present and be more with them or something. So she definitely gives fill in the blank sections where you can just kind of ask yourself questions that will help you to go, okay, this is my plan for this. This is my plan for this, Those fill in the blank sections are actually kind of helping you set your boundaries as you go, because you're making some decisions about what is and what isn't going to happen, or what you will and won't do. And like I said, it's not just you make the decision and then inform everybody else. It's definitely encouraging this interaction with the people in your life that will be participating in these celebrations, because it is true that setting boundaries during the holidays starts with figuring out your needs, getting really clear on, okay, maybe this year, you've got an aging parent that you're also taking care of. You have needs. It's okay to say you have needs. And instead of thinking everything has to be the same as it always has been, you have to assess, how are things this year, okay? So getting clear on your needs, it's going to help you to identify your boundaries, and it's going to help you keep yourself accountable all season long. And I love the helpfulness it is to me, and that's why I wanted to share it here. I just want you to know that using this journal while you're also practicing those 3 mindsets that I've shared, I really think it's going to help you to communicate your boundaries gently but firmly, and it's going to help you protect your peace while still nurturing your relationships. I think that's the beautiful thing, And your pre-planning using this video and the holiday control journal, it's going to feel like you have this wise friend that's just supporting you, and helping you through these challenging moments that holidays can bring. And you're actually that wise friend. You, by thinking things through and preparing yourself for the limits and the boundaries that might need to be put in place, you are actually supporting yourself by taking the time to make those choices before the holiday rush. So in conclusion now, I just want you to remember that God does support the peace that you and I are seeking. We use boundaries to find that peace, to establish that. and that proactive communication is always going to empower positive and balanced changes. So we have to proactively communicate early, often, and clearly. We have to keep engaged in that process. And boundaries are definitely vital so that you and I can nurture a healthy balance. At the end of the day, nobody's going to do that for you or me. We have to do that ourselves. And I think maybe as an encouragement, I just want you to remember also that boundaries do not distance you from loved ones. Now, if you get pushback and people start closing the door on you because you suddenly are saying you have boundaries, that you are trying to honor your balance, you better not drop your boundaries. You better be asking yourself, wow, what kind of relationship did I really have with that family member or that person? Because it's not supposed to distance you from loved ones. And if it does, I hope that you will remember your balance is what is guiding you. And therefore, if you are trying to convey boundaries and you're working through, then hold steady with that, okay? And so to close now, I just want to give you your next step. Definitely get that holiday control journal. You know, go to flylady.net, look it up. It's super simple. She's got a little square down in the center of the page that says, you know, download control journals. And when you click on that, you can find the holiday control journal. Look at it. You know, just browse through and see for yourself, because her intro with her words of encouragement to keep things simple and tips for how to approach the holidays with peace and balance, I think it's super helpful. And any pages that you think you want to print out so that you can make your notes and keep yourself on track, I do it every year, and I think, you know, it's a great thing. So get started on that today, okay? Because those ideas will help you to take those incremental steps. That is helping you to sail right into the holidays. Do it now, because you know, her idea is by the beginning of your holiday season, usually it's like the month of your holiday celebrations, you just want to be enjoying it. You don't want to be like rushing around too much. And so she really has thought it through and given us a really good guideline. So I really hope that this was useful to you and that you will come back for my next video, which is going to be about how to hold boundaries when family pressures you. And until then, let's just keep walking our paths with intention and with grace. And I'll see you next time on the Balance Journey.